I was standing in the cramped, narrow kitchen of the apartment I had scrubbed, painted, and paid for with 22 years of wages from a medical clinic reception desk, holding a ceramic tray of cheese, when my daughter-in-law smiled at her corporate boss and introduced me as the evening catering help. Before I tell you about the exact moment the blood drained from my face and my heart turned to pure ice, I would love to know where you are listening from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below right now. It always amazes me how our stories connect us across the globe, and I read every single one of your locations. Now, let me tell you how a woman who spent her entire life organizing schedules, smiling at angry patients, and answering phones finally learned to hang up on her own family. The tray in my hands felt suddenly heavy. The cheese I had bought with my own money. The crackers I had arranged just the way she asked. Everything felt like a prop in a play I did not know I had auditioned for. My daughter-in-law, a young woman who worked in public relations and wore clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, did not even look at me when she said it. She just waved a manicured hand in my direction and kept talking to a tall man in a tailored suit. I stood there, wearing the plain black trousers and simple gray blouse I always wore to work, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I did not drop the tray. I did not scream. I placed the platter gently on the granite counter I had saved up for 5 years to install, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked out the back door into the cool evening air. I sat on the small wooden bench on my balcony, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses coming from my own living room. The living room where my son had learned to walk. The living room where I had sat up countless nights balancing my meager checkbook, trying to figure out how to afford his winter coats. They had moved in 8 months ago. My son had taken a massive risk on a startup company that immediately folded, leaving them with broken lease fees and mountain of debt. My daughter-in-law had sobbed in my tiny entryway, telling me she could not bear the thought of moving back to her parents' house in the suburbs. She said it would be just until they saved enough for a down payment on a place of their own. I had taken the fold-out couch in the small den. I had given them my master bedroom. I am a receptionist. I do not have a fortune, but I have this apartment, and I had a mother's instinct to protect her child. The morning after the dinner party, I woke up at 5:30, my usual time, and walked into the kitchen to make coffee. The sink was overflowing with dirty wine glasses and crusted plates. My daughter-in-law walked in a few minutes later, tying her silk robe. She did not say good morning. She opened the refrigerator, stared inside, and sighed heavily. "You forgot to buy the oat milk again," she said, her voice dripping with that slow, deliberate patience people use when speaking to a slow child. I turned to face her, holding my cheap ceramic mug. "I did not forget," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I worked 10-hour shifts on my feet. The grocery store was closed by the time I took the bus home." She rolled her eyes, leaning against the counter. "Right. Well, my friends noticed the cheap wine last night. It was a little embarrassing. And honestly, it was a bit awkward when you hovered in the kitchen. We needed a sophisticated vibe, and you standing there looking like you do, it just confused people. That is why I told Richard you were the caterer. It was just easier to explain." I looked at her. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes, the perfect hair, the absolute lack of shame in her posture. "This is my home," I said quietly. Her smile was small, tight, and completely devoid of warmth. "We live here too now," she said, "and we are the ones actually building a future. You just sit behind a desk all day checking people in for flu shots. You do not understand how networking operates. I need this space to reflect success." "I am just asking you to stay out of the way when I have important people over. Is that really too much to ask after everything we deal with living in this cramped space?" She turned and walked back down the hallway before I could form a single word in response. I went to work that day. I sat at my desk behind the sliding glass window of the clinic. The phone rang and I answered it. "Good morning, Riverside Medical. How can I help you?" I said those words 50 times before noon, my voice cheerful, professional, empty. I scheduled appointments. I collected insurance cards. I smiled at anxious mothers and elderly men with bad coughs. My hands typed the information, but my mind was stuck in that kitchen. I kept hearing her call my home cramped. I kept hearing her dismiss my entire life's work as just sitting behind a desk. At lunchtime, I went to the break room. My coworker, an older nurse named Helen, who had known me for 15 years, sat down across from me with her sandwich. She took one look at my face and put her sandwich down. "What is wrong?" she asked. I did not want to say it. Saying it out loud made it real. But the words spilled out of me, falling onto the plastic table like broken glass. I told her about the catering comment. I told her about the oat milk. I told her about the master bedroom I had given up. Helen did not offer empty sympathy. She did not pat my hand. She looked at me with hard, serious eyes. "When was the last time you slept in a real bed?" she asked. I swallowed hard. 8 months ago, I whispered. Helen leaned forward. "You are letting them treat you like a tenant in a building you own. They are not saving money. I saw her new designer handbag when she came to drop off your keys last week. You are funding their lifestyle with your peace of mind." I took the bus home that evening, feeling a strange, tight knot forming in my chest. I opened my front door. The apartment was quiet. I walked into the small den where I slept. My mail, which usually sat on the small console table in the hallway, was tossed carelessly onto my fold-out bed. I sat down to sort through it. Electric bill, water bill, clinic newsletter, and then a thick envelope from the property management company that oversees my building's homeowner association. I opened it. Inside was a formal notice of receipt regarding a request to transfer the primary association voting rights and emergency contact authority from my name to my daughter-in-law's name. Attached was a copy of an email sent from my own personal email address, the one I kept logged in on the shared desktop computer in the living room. The email stated that due to my declining health and increasing mental fatigue, my daughter-in-law would be taking over all administrative and financial responsibilities for the unit. I read the paper 3 times. My hands began to shake, not with sadness, but with a deep, terrifying clarity. Declining health, mental fatigue. She was building a paper trail. She was establishing herself as the primary resident, laying the groundwork to take over the only asset I had in the world. I did not storm into the master bedroom. I did not yell. I folded the paper, put it in my purse, and walked to the kitchen to make dinner as if nothing had happened. 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, I used my accumulated sick leave for the first time in 4 years. I did not go to the clinic. Instead, I took the subway downtown to a legal aid office that Helen had recommended. I sat in a waiting room that smelled of old carpet and floor wax, waiting for my name to be called. A young attorney with tired eyes and a sharp suit brought me into his office. I handed him the paperwork. I explained the living arrangement. I explained the email I had not written. He reviewed the documents, his expression growing more serious by the minute. "This is attempted fraud," he said plainly. "She used your computer and your identity to initiate an administrative change. If she establishes a record of managing your affairs, and if they refuse to leave, evicting them could become a protracted legal nightmare, especially if she claims she is your unofficial caregiver." I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. Caregiver. She called me a caterer to her friends and a burden to the building management. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are the sole owner of the property," he said. "You need to formally serve them a 30-day notice to quit the premises. And you need to secure all your personal documents, change your passwords, and file a police report regarding the unauthorized email to establish a record of identity theft." I stared at his desk. File a police report against my son's wife? The thought made my stomach churn. My son, who had looked so defeated when his business failed. My son, who I had protected from every harsh reality since his father walked out on us 20 years ago. "If I do this," I said, "it will break my family." The attorney looked up from the papers. "Ma'am," he said gently, "your family is already broken. You are just the only one bleeding from the edges." I left the office with a drafted eviction notice and a set of clear instructions. I went to the bank and moved my small savings into a new account. I went to the library and changed every password on every account I owned. I bought a small lockbox and put the deed to my apartment, my passport, and my tax returns inside. By the time I returned home, the knot in my chest had hardened into a stone. I walked into the apartment. My son was sitting on the couch, playing a video game. My daughter-in-law was at the kitchen counter, typing on her expensive laptop. She looked up and frowned. "You are home early," she said. "I need the kitchen. I am filming a vlog about working from home, and your uniform is depressing the lighting." I walked into the kitchen. I did not lower my eyes. I reached into my purse, pulled out the manila envelope, and placed it directly onto her keyboard. She scoffed and pushed it away. "What is this?" she asked. "Read it," I said. My son paused his game and looked over. "Mom, what is going on?" he asked, standing up. My daughter-in-law opened the envelope. I watched her eyes scan the legal header. I watched the color drain from her face. I watched the mask of arrogant superiority shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces. She looked at me, her mouth open. "You are evicting us?" she whispered. 30 days, I said, my voice echoing in the small kitchen. "You have 30 days to find a new place to reflect your success." She slammed her hands on the counter. "Are you out of your mind?" she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "We have nowhere to go. We are family. You cannot do this." I pulled the copy of the property management email from my purse and laid it next to the eviction notice. "I can," I said, "and I am." Because my mental fatigue is apparently so severe that I can no longer handle the burden of housing guests who try to steal my identity. My son walked over and picked up the email. He read it, his face turning pale. He looked at his wife. "Did you write this?" he asked. "Did you pretend to be my mother?" She did not look at him. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a cold, toxic venom. "I was protecting our future," she snapped. "She is just a receptionist. She does not know how to manage property values. I was taking initiative." "Initiative," I repeated. "You tried to erase me from my own life. You ate my food, slept in my bed, and treated me like dirt on your shoe. 30 days. And if you ever access my accounts again, the next envelope will be delivered by a police officer." I walked into the den, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the fold-out bed. My hands were shaking so violently I had to clasp them together. Through the thin walls I heard shouting. I heard my son asking her how she could do something so stupid. I heard her crying, playing the victim, talking about how stressed she was, how I was a controlling monster who hated her from the start. I did not intervene. I lay down on the thin mattress and closed my eyes, exhausted to my very bones. The next 30 days were a silent, agonizing war. My daughter-in-law stopped speaking to me entirely. She communicated only through aggressive actions. She left cabinet doors wide open. She burned meals and left the charred pans in the sink. She blasted music when she knew I was trying to sleep before my early shifts. I did not react. I went to the clinic. I answered the phones. I smiled at the patients. I came home and sat on my balcony. I realized that my refusal to engage was driving her insane. She thrived on conflict, on drama, on having an enemy to blame for her own failures. By refusing to fight, I was starving her. 2 weeks into the notice period, my phone buzzed while I was at the reception desk. It was a text message from a cousin who lived out of state. It was a screenshot of a public post my daughter-in-law had made on a community forum. It was a long, dramatic essay about elder abuse. She claimed she had spent the last 8 months caring for her severely depressed, hoarding mother-in-law, putting her own career on hold. She wrote that I had suffered a mental break and was throwing them onto the street in a fit of paranoia. She asked for donations to a crowdfunding page to help them secure emergency housing, claiming my toxic behavior had drained their savings. I stared at the screen. The absolute audacity of the lie took my breath away. Helen walked up behind me and looked over my shoulder. She read the post. Her jaw tightened. "Do not respond to it," Helen said firmly. "Let her lie. People who know you know the truth, and people who do not know you do not matter." But I knew it could not just sit there. I took a deep breath, opened my phone, and forwarded the screenshot to the legal aid attorney. He replied 10 minutes later with a single sentence: "I will draft a cease and desist for defamation and demand the fraudulent fundraising page be removed immediately." That evening, I walked into the apartment and found my son packing boxes in the hallway. He looked terrible. He looked like a man who had finally woken up from a long, confusing dream. "Where is she?" I asked. "She is at a coffee shop," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, I saw the post. I made her take it down. I canceled the fundraiser. I am so sorry." I stood there in my gray uniform. "Sorry does not fix what she tried to do," I said. "And sorry does not fix the fact that you watched her treat me like a servant for 8 months and said absolutely nothing. You let her take my bed. You let her insult my job. You let her make me a stranger in my own home. He sat down on a taped box and put his head in his hands. I know, he whispered. I was just trying to keep the peace. She gets so angry, and I just wanted to avoid the fights. I thought if we just got through this rough patch, it would get better. I looked at my boy, the boy I had raised on macaroni and cheese and library books, the boy I had worked double shifts to send to a good school. Keeping the peace by sacrificing me is not peace, I told him. It is surrender, and I am done surrendering. They moved out on the 28th day. A rented truck idled by the curb while they carried their things out. My daughter-in-law walked past me without a word, her face set in a rigid mask of fury and humiliation. She refused to look at me. My son lingered by the door. He handed me the keys. We rented a tiny studio on the edge of town, he said. I am taking a second job at a warehouse to cover the rent. I nodded. Good luck, I said. I did not hug him. I did not tell him I loved him. I just closed the door. The silence that fell over the apartment was absolute. It rang in my ears. I walked into the master bedroom. It smelled of her expensive perfume and stale air. I opened the windows as wide as they would go. I stripped the bed, rolled up the rug, and scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees until my knuckles ached. I moved my furniture back. I put my cheap ceramic mugs back in the front row of the cabinet. I bought the oat milk and poured it directly down the drain just to watch it go. It took months for the knot in my chest to fully dissolve. I kept expecting to hear her passive-aggressive sighs. I kept expecting to find my things moved. But slowly, the apartment became mine again. I started sleeping through the night. At the clinic, Helen told me I looked 10 years younger. I felt it. I stopped apologizing for existing. When patients were rude at the reception desk, I no longer shrank away. I spoke to them with the calm, unshakable authority of a woman who had faced down a monster in her own home and won. My son visits me once a month now. He comes alone. He told me during a quiet dinner at my small kitchen table that his wife had moved out. The pressure of living in a tiny studio without my financial cushion had shattered the illusion of their marriage. She blamed him for the eviction. She blamed him for having to work. He finally saw her for what she was. I did not gloat. I felt a profound sadness for the pain he was going through. But I also felt a deep sense of relief. He is going to therapy. He is learning how to set boundaries. We are slowly, carefully rebuilding our relationship, piece by piece. Last week, I received a message on social media from a woman I did not know. She worked as a receptionist in a dental office in another state. She wrote that she had heard my story through a mutual acquaintance in a support group for parents of estranged adult children. She said she had been sleeping on her own couch for a year, letting her entitled son and his wife take over her life because she was afraid of losing them. She asked me how I found the courage to kick them out. I sat at my computer and typed my reply. I told her that courage does not feel like bravery when you are doing it. It feels like fear. It feels like nausea. It feels like your heart is going to beat out of your chest. But you do it anyway because the alternative is letting yourself be erased. I told her that her home is her sanctuary and no one, not even blood, has the right to treat her like a trespasser in her own life. I am still a receptionist. I still wear a gray uniform and comfortable shoes. I still answer phones and deal with stressful days. But when I turn the key in my lock every evening, I step into a space that belongs entirely to me. There is no one to judge my clothes, no one to critique my wine, no one to relegate me to the shadows. I built this life, hour by hour, paycheck by paycheck. It may not be a mansion, and it may not reflect corporate success, but it is mine. Before we finish, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set a boundary so hard it temporarily broke your family? How did you survive the guilt? Let me know in the comments below. I will be reading and responding to as many as I can. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss a confession. Remember, true love does not require you to make yourself smaller. Keep your boundaries firm and keep your peace intact.